The jungle doesn't keep time. It devours it. For 30 years, a lone figure moved through the shadows of Lubang Island, rifle in hand, uniform rotting, eyes sharp as ever. He hunted by moonlight, hid from villagers, and reported every movement to an army that no longer existed. His name was Hiroo Onoda, and he didn't know the war was over. The world had changed. Japan had surrendered, cities had rebuilt, men had walked on the moon, but deep in that Philippine jungle, one soldier still fought on. He patched his clothes with vines, sharpened his blade on river stones, and carried out his mission with absolute devotion. He burned crops, raided villages, and vanished again into the trees. To the locals, he was a ghost. To himself, he was still an imperial officer, sworn never to surrender, never to die in disgrace, and never to stop fighting until Japan called him home. But Japan had forgotten him. This is the story of a man who escaped capture not once, not twice, but 3 times. A man who survived war, peace, and madness itself. A man who fought until the world came back to tell him it was over. Hiroo Onoda was born in 1922 in the small Japanese town of Kamekawa, the son of a quiet merchant and a nation preparing for war. From the time he could walk, Onoda was told that Japan was divine, that its emperor was a living god, and that obedience was not a choice, but a duty. By the 1930s, that belief was everywhere. In schools, in songs, in posters lining the streets. Children learned that surrender was the ultimate shame, and that dying for the emperor was the highest honor. Onoda believed it, completely. At 18, he joined the Imperial Japanese Army, strong, disciplined, ambitious. But it wasn't just his strength that set him apart. It was his mind. He was clever, observant, loyal to a fault. His superiors noticed. And soon, he was selected for something rare, training as an intelligence officer in the secret Nakano School, Japan's elite center for psychological and guerrilla warfare. There, Onoda was taught deception, sabotage, and survival, how to live off the land, how to blend in with locals, how to vanish without a trace. But more than that, they trained his spirit. They told him, "You are the eyes and ears of the empire. You are never to surrender. Even if your unit is destroyed, you will continue fighting. Even if Japan itself falls, you will carry out your mission." Those words became his scripture. When the war began to turn against Japan, men like Onoda were sent behind enemy lines to outlast, to outwit, to survive. For him, the idea of defeat simply did not exist. He was ready to die for the emperor. What he didn't know was that he would instead be asked to live for him for 30 long, impossible years. December 1944. Japan was losing the war. The Allies were closing in from every direction, and every new day brought another retreat, another surrender. That was when Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda received his orders. He was to deploy to the Philippine island of Lubang, a small jungle-covered speck west of Manila, strategically useless, but vital for what Japan feared most, an American invasion. His mission was simple on paper: sabotage enemy operations, destroy supply depots, and, above all, never surrender. He was told, "You are forbidden to take your own life. You will survive. You will continue the fight, no matter how long it takes." Those words would define the rest of his life. When Onoda landed on Lubang with a small unit of soldiers, the island was already a graveyard of broken battles. Japanese forces that were demoralized, scattered, starving. But Onoda came with authority and conviction. He tried to rally them, to prepare defenses, to organize resistance. But the war was collapsing faster than anyone could comprehend. Within weeks, the Americans arrived. Air raids thundered over the island. Gunfire echoed through the palm trees. Japanese command crumbled. Orders stopped coming. By February 1945, the remaining Japanese garrison was annihilated. Some surrendered, others were killed, and Hiroo Onoda, along with 3 other soldiers, vanished into the jungle. To them, the war was not over. They had heard no order to lay down arms, no signal to stop fighting. And for Onoda, who had been taught that surrender was the greatest sin, silence could only mean one thing. Japan was still fighting somewhere out there. So, they disappeared into the trees, for ghosts of an empire that no longer existed. They built shelters from bamboo. They stole food from villages at night. They watched the skies for rescue planes that would never come. In their minds, they were still soldiers. Every day was another patrol. Every rustle in the jungle was another enemy. And as weeks turned to months and months to years, Onoda's world shrank to the sound of the rain, the whisper of the trees, and the voice of duty that refused to die. The war, for everyone else, had ended in 1945. But for Hiroo Onoda, it was only just beginning. The year was 1946. For most of the world, the Second World War had become history. Parades, peace treaties, and reconstruction. But on one forgotten island in the Philippines, a handful of men still lived as if the Empire of Japan stood unbroken. Hiroo Onoda and his 3 comrades, Corporal Shimada, Private Kozuka, and Private Akatsu, believed the Emperor's army was still fighting somewhere beyond the horizon. Cut off from all contact, they read the world through jungle whispers, gunshots in the distance, lights on the coast, aircraft above. Every sound was a message. Every silence, a trap. They hunted wild pigs, stole rice from farms, and moved only by moonlight. By day, they hid in the mountains, surrounded by vines thick as rope and mosquitoes that never stopped biting. Their uniforms rotted, their boots fell apart, yet they still saluted each other every morning, performed roll call, cleaned their rifles. Discipline was the only thing keeping them sane. Then one morning, a new sound echoed through the jungle. A voice. It came from a loudspeaker on a U.S. patrol boat. The war is over. Japan has surrendered. Lay down your arms and come out peacefully. The men froze. Could it be true? Onoda shook his head. This is enemy propaganda, he said. Don't listen. He had been trained in counterintelligence. He knew how easily truth could be used as bait. And so they stayed hidden. Leaflets began falling from the sky, written in Japanese, stamped with official seals. Hostilities have ceased. Please surrender. Onoda studied them carefully, then smiled grimly. They've gone to great lengths, he said. They've even forged our language. To him, it was proof, not of peace, but of deceit. The Americans must be desperate to flush out the last Japanese on Lubon. That's how good the trick was. So the 4 men doubled down. They made raids on villages, stealing supplies. If locals resisted, they opened fire. To them, these people were collaborators. By 1949, Private Akatsu could take it no longer. Malaria, hunger, and endless fear had broken him. One night, he slipped away through the trees, vanishing into the darkness. Months later, word reached Onoda that Akatsu had surrendered to the Philippine army and was alive. For most soldiers, that might have been a relief. For Onoda, it was proof that the enemy was brainwashing prisoners, turning them into messengers of lies. He told his remaining men, he's been captured. He'll lead them back to us. From that moment on, their paranoia became a fortress. They dug deeper into the wilderness, surviving on coconuts and raw fish, patching their clothes with bark. Seasons blurred together. They counted time not by years, but by ammunition left, by the wear of a blade, by how many bullets they had used to defend a belief that the world had already forgotten. Then came tragedy. In 1954, Corporal Shimada was shot during a skirmish with a search party. Onoda tried to treat him with leaves and bandages torn from his own shirt, but the infection spread. A week later, Shimada died in the mud. There were only 2 of them left now, Onoda and Kozuka. They buried Shimada under the trees, marked the spot with a bayonet, and saluted. They didn't speak for days. Somewhere far across the ocean, a new Japan was rising. One of skyscrapers, neon lights, and peace treaties. But here, on Lubang, two ghosts kept fighting a war that had ended almost a decade ago. They called themselves the Lubang Garrison, the last defenders of the Emperor's will. They lived by rules no longer written for a country that no longer existed. And yet, in their minds, they were heroes. Unbreakable, loyal, the last samurai in a jungle that refused to let them go. By the 1960s, the world had changed beyond recognition. The war that once consumed nations now lived only in history books and memorials. Children who had grown up during the fighting were now raising children of their own. Tokyo was rebuilding. Neon lights, jazz bars, Olympic stadiums, the hum of a modern age. But on one forgotten island in the Philippines, two men were still fighting World War II. Hidden deep in the jungle of Lubang, Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda and Private Kinshichi Kozuka lived like shadows. They had been alone for nearly 20 years. Their uniforms ragged, their rifles rusting, their skin weathered by sun and rain. And yet every dawn, they still bowed toward the east, toward Japan, and swore to serve the Emperor. To them, the silence of the jungle wasn't peace. It was the calm before an enemy offensive. Every airplane overhead was a reconnaissance mission. Every Filipino farmer, a possible spy. They didn't know that Japan had rebuilt, that their emperor had gone on radio decades ago to declare surrender. No. In their minds, they were still soldiers in a war that had simply gone quiet. And so, they survived the only way they knew how. By discipline, by duty, by refusing to give up. They crafted shelters from palm fronds, dried meat over smoky fires, and sewed patches onto their decaying uniforms. At night, they whispered about strategy, the locations of enemy patrols, rumors of Allied movements. Even after 20 years, they still planned counterattacks that would never come. Occasionally, leaflets still drifted down from planes, faded, almost comical now. They showed pictures of Japanese families, city skylines, modern cars. To Onoda, they were elaborate forgeries. Photos mean nothing, he told Kozuka. The Americans can fake anything. Then came 1972, a quarter of a century after Japan's surrender. Onoda was 50 years old. Kozuka was in his early 50s. And both were still armed, still convinced that any day now, Japan would send reinforcements. That year, they carried out one of their last missions. They burned rice stores belonging to local farmers, believing they were sabotaging enemy supplies. But this time, the enemy fired back. Police officers on patrol opened fire. Kozuka fell, shot dead in the dirt. Onoda escaped into the jungle, crawling through mud, clutching his rifle, heart hammering in disbelief. For hours, he lay hidden among the vines, staring at the body of the man who had been his brother-in-arms for nearly 30 years. When night fell, he dragged Kozuka's body away, buried him under palm leaves, and whispered a soldier's prayer. Then he was alone, the last Japanese soldier on Lubang Island. In the darkness, Onoda wrote in his journal, "I'm still waiting for orders. I will not die here. The empire will return." But no one was coming. By now, Japanese newspapers had begun to run strange headlines. Is a soldier still fighting the war in the Philippines? The legend of Hiroo Onoda became a mystery, a ghost story, something between tragedy and folklore. The Japanese government had tried to find him before, search parties, loudspeakers, even letters from his family. But every time, Onoda dismissed them as enemy tricks. To surrender without orders would be treason. He had once sworn to fight until officially relieved of duty, and a soldier's word, to him, was sacred. For the next 2 years, Onoda roamed the mountains alone, a phantom soldier in a war that had ended before most of the world was even born. He stole from villagers to survive. He hid from search teams. He watched the seasons turn. Each sunrise reminded him of his oath. Each sunset of everyone he'd lost. 29 years. 29 years of war fought by one man. By 1974, Hiroo Onoda had been at war for 29 years. He was a relic of another world, still armed, still disciplined, still convinced that one day the emperor's orders would come. But the jungle was changing. The birds sang louder. The locals spoke of a strange ghost who stole their rice. And somewhere across the ocean, in Japan, a young man was packing his bags, chasing a rumor that no one believed. His name was Norio Suzuki. He was 24 years old, a restless student, tired of modern life, fascinated by forgotten legends. Before leaving, he told his friends, "I'm going to look for Lieutenant Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman," in that order. They laughed, but Suzuki wasn't joking. Armed with little more than a backpack, a camera, and a sense of destiny, he traveled to the Philippines. There, he began his search for a man lost in time, a soldier who refused to surrender. For weeks, he wandered through the jungle of Lubang, asking villagers, sleeping in huts, following vague directions. Most told him that man's a myth. Others whispered, "If you see him, you'll never come back." Then, one afternoon, while walking near a small stream, Suzuki noticed something strange: footprints. Fresh ones. He followed them, cautiously, quietly, until he saw movement in the brush. A figure emerged, lean, bearded, rifle in hand. The man's eyes were sharp, suspicious, the same as they'd been 30 years ago. Suzuki raised his hands. "Lieutenant Onoda," he called softly. The soldier didn't reply. He just aimed his rifle. Suzuki swallowed, forcing a smile. "I'm Japanese," he said. "The war is over. It ended in 1945. Silence. Then Onoda spoke, his voice low, hoarse, as if in use for years. "If you are truly Japanese," he said, "why are you here?" "I came to find you," Suzuki answered. "You should know better," Onoda replied. "The war can't be over. They would have sent me orders." Suzuki stepped closer, unarmed, unafraid. "Lieutenant, your commanding officer would want you to live." For hours, they spoke, two men separated by 3 decades of time. Suzuki told him about Japan's surrender, about the emperor's broadcast, about the cities rebuilt from ashes. He described televisions, highways, airplanes that crossed oceans in hours. Onoda listened in silence. He didn't believe him, not entirely. But there was something in Suzuki's eyes, something that felt real. Before parting, Onoda said one thing: "If Japan has truly surrendered, I will lay down my rifle, but only when my commanding officer orders it." Suzuki nodded. "I'll find him," he promised. And then he left, back to Japan, carrying a story so unbelievable that many called it fantasy. But he didn't stop until he found Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, the officer who had given Onoda his final mission in 1944. When Taniguchi heard the news, he was stunned. His former subordinate, alive, still fighting, still loyal after 3 decades? It defied reason. 2 months later, the aging major arrived on Lubang Island, escorted by the Japanese government and the press. He wore a simple uniform and carried a letter, Onoda's official orders, written and signed by himself. On March 9th, 1974, after 29 years of war, Major Taniguchi walked into the jungle one last time. Suzuki led the way. They found Onoda near the same stream, rifle across his knees, eyes cautious as ever. Taniguchi stepped forward. "Lieutenant," he said, "the war ended a long time ago. Japan's forces have surrendered. Your mission is over." Onoda froze. The words he had waited half his life to hear, and the ones he feared most. He asked to see the order. Taniguchi handed him the paper, stamped, signed, unmistakably real. Onoda read it in silence. His hands trembled. For the first time in nearly 30 years, he stood at attention, eyes glistening with tears, and said, "I am honored to have faithfully served my country. I now surrender my arms." He removed his rifle, his sword, and the dagger his mother had given him before the war, to take his own life if captured. He handed them over, one by one, like pieces of a life finally laid to rest. As the cameras flashed, Onoda bowed deeply, a gesture not of defeat, but of completion. When Hiroo Onoda finally stepped out of the jungle, the world was waiting for him. He emerged from the trees in a tattered uniform, his boots worn to the sole, his rifle still gleaming from meticulous care. Cameras clicked, reporters shouted questions, but the man at the center of it all seemed lost. It was March 1974. Japan had rebuilt itself into an economic powerhouse. The neon lights of Tokyo, the bullet trains, the modern towers, they all belonged to a future Onoda had never imagined. He had gone to war for an empire that no longer existed. The emperor he'd sworn to serve was still alive, but now spoke of peace, democracy, and prosperity. The country he'd dreamed of returning to had moved on without him. When he arrived at the airport, thousands gathered to see him. Some waved flags, calling him a hero. Others whispered that he was a madman, a relic of a darker time. To Onoda, it was overwhelming. He bowed deeply before the crowd, tears filling his eyes, and said softly, "I am sorry it took me so long." He was given full military honors, a uniform, a pension, and a homecoming ceremony. But the world he entered felt colder than the jungle he'd left behind. For decades, he had lived by rules that no longer made sense. Honor, obedience, sacrifice. Now, he saw young people in jeans, listening to American music, questioning the very empire he'd spent his life defending. He couldn't understand it. He had fought for duty, and now duty seemed like a forgotten word. In interviews, journalists asked if he regretted the killings, the raids, the years of fighting a war that was long over. Onoda's eyes darkened. "I did what I was ordered to do," he said quietly. A soldier must not doubt his mission. But beneath that stoic face, guilt festered. He later admitted that he often saw the faces of the villagers he'd hurt, men and women who had simply been trying to survive. He carried their memories like ghosts that never left his side. The Japanese government offered him fame, money, even political office. He refused them all. Within months, he left Japan again, this time for Brazil, where he bought a cattle ranch. There, surrounded by open fields and silence, he tried to rebuild a life on his own terms. He lived simply, waking before dawn, working the land with the same discipline he had carried through the jungle. Years later, when asked if he hated the world for forgetting him, he smiled faintly and said, "I was never fighting against the world. I was fighting against surrender." In time, Onoda returned to Japan one last time, not as a soldier, but as a teacher. He opened a wilderness survival camp for children, teaching them the values of self-reliance, courage, and endurance. He wanted the next generation to be strong, not in blind obedience, but in spirit. When he spoke to them, he often said, "You must never give up, but you must also know when to stop fighting." It was a lesson he had learned too late. In 2014, Hiroo Onoda passed away at the age of 91. At his funeral, his coffin was draped not in the flag of the old empire, but the modern flag of Japan, a nation reborn from the ashes of the war he never stopped fighting. For some, he was a hero. For others, a tragic reminder of loyalty taken too far. But for everyone, his story asked the same question. When does duty become blindness? And when does devotion become a cage? Because sometimes the hardest war to end is the one inside your own mind. If stories like this move you, if you believe history's forgotten soldiers deserve to be remembered, then help share their legacy. Like the video, so more people can discover Onoda's story. Subscribe for more true stories of courage, obsession, and the human spirit. And tell me in the comments, would you have surrendered or kept fighting? And I'll see you next time.